Hi everybody, welcome to this tutorial. So what we're looking at today, as we've said, is we're going to be looking at actually producing virtual cameras in After Effects. Now we've done this a little bit before, of course, because we did some camera tracking and created a virtual camera in the camera track. What we're going to be doing today is, rather than just using that virtual camera as a sort of invisible way of trying to work out where a real camera had been, what we're going to be doing today is actually creating that virtual camera and making it do certain things. So the first thing we're going to do is to produce a little animation, something a bit like this. Okay, so what we've got here is we've created a camera inside of After Effects, and we're filming various elements of the digital media logo, and we're animating not the logo but the movement of the camera to give us bits of depth of field and zoom and so on. Okay, so all sorts of different things we can do, so let's get to it. So what we're going to be doing is I'm going to go to File and New Project. I don't need that. Okay, so I'm going to go to New Composition 1920 by 1080. I'm going to have a white background on this one, and I'm going to click OK. It doesn't matter if you haven't got the white background because I'm going to add a solid anyway. Okay, click OK. Right then, we're going to go to Finder. We're going to go to our the 3 bits that you need for the course logo. So this is the background, foreground, and circle. Okay, so I'm going to start with the background and drag that down onto our comp. Now, as you can see, the course logo is in a square format, so I'm just going to have to scale this down to about there. So that's 56%. So I'll remember that for the circle, which I'm going to drag down to there. Transform, scale that down to 56 as well. And then the foreground, drag that down, open that up, transform, scale, drag that down to 56. There we go. So there's our course logo, but of course it's made up of these different elements. And if you want to be doing things like that with logos you've made or whatever it might be, you can just quickly do it in Photoshop. So here's Photoshop, and I've just got my various layers, and if you export like this bit on a transparent background, for example, as a PNG file, export quick PNG, then the PNG file will keep the transparent background, the alpha channel as we call it, which will mean that then it's invisible when you get it into After Effects. So that's basically what I've done. So I've taken that bit and then also the layer, for example, cut out the white, so it had a white transparent background, exported it as a PNG, and so on and so on. Okay, so anyway, so here we are in our After Effects project. I'm just going to create layer and new solid and just make that white like so, just because it's easier having a white solid. I mean, you can just turn that on like so if you had a white solid originally, but I just find with 3D projects particularly it's just sometimes useful just to have a white solid there just so you know what's going on. Okay, so what we're now going to do is we're going to come up to layer and we're going to go to new and camera. So the first thing you need to know about cameras in After Effects is they come in 2 flavors. One node cameras are ones that move around themselves. So I'm trying to imagine that camera on a tripod and you're moving the pan handle and you're twisting it around or whatever. And 2 node cameras. And 2 node cameras pan or move around a subject. So in one, you've got a camera which could look at our logo and then move away from it. And in the other, you've got a camera which, when you move it around, it's going to try and keep that logo in frame, so it's going to basically be moving around that. And that's what we're going to be using today to begin with, is this 2-node camera which moves around the subject. Okay. Now, I know that we're going to want some nice out of focus elements in this scene. So what I'm going to do is, first of all, I'm going to set my preset to 50mm camera, so it's 50mm lens basically on my camera. Okay, and it will go to custom now, because what I'm going to do is, instead of 5.6, I'm going to take my f number to 1. Now our aperture is 50mm. Basically what that means is our aperture is nice and wide, which means that we're going to get lots of lovely out of focus elements, just like you would with a normal camera. So I'm going to make sure enable depth of field is turned on, by the way, just to make sure that that depth of field, those out of focus elements that we want from a nice shallow depth of field is going to be prominent within our scene. Okay, now blur level, we're probably going to need to take blur level up to about 700%, I'd have thought, to make it really work for this scene. So I'm going to do that now. Okay, and I just hit return then, by the way, so let me turn that back on. So yeah, so that's 700% about that, and we'll be seeing what that means in a minute. And then I'm going to click OK. So you might think, all right, well, okay, all well and good. We've got our camera, but where is it? What's going on? Well, the best way to try and sort of see what's going on inside of After Effects when you're using a camera is have two views. First of all, the viewfinder, if you like, what the camera's seeing, and then also the set. Okay, so we're going to have, instead of one view, we're going to come down to here, we're going to go to two views. Okay, now the second view, if we zoom out on this one a little bit, this is our camera, this is our set. Okay, now our second view, I mean, you can have it as being whatever you like. So you could have it as being front or top, or whatever, just to sort of see what's happening. Okay, but personally, I like the 3D kind of views because it just gives me more of a sense of where the camera is in relation to everything else. Just like a normal After Effects project, you hold down space and you can move your project around. Okay, so you're sort of saying, all right, so here's our camera, here's our set, here's our 3D object, but where is our stuff? Well, obviously the reason we can't see it yet is because we haven't turned it into 3D. So we now select these boxes here to turn these into 3D shapes, and now we have ourselves a three-dimensional set. So what we're going to do just quickly is I'm going to zoom in, and again, it would be much more difficult to do it on this one because we can't see what we're doing. So we're going to come onto our 3D set over here, and I'm going to click on Digital Media Foreground. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to separate these elements out. Okay, so I'm going to move this a bit closer to the camera, and you can see what's happened in our viewfinder over on the left here is that that's now moved closer to the camera, and because of our shallow depth of field, it's now out of focus. Okay, cool. Might move that back a bit. I'm going to take our circle and do the same thing. So grab that Z axis, right, don't rotate it, just move it forward. Okay, so it's sort of like so. That'll do. Okay. And now you can kind of see what's going on is that now these elements are at different distances from the camera, and so the camera is recording them differently, and of course there's focus. Yeah, I think. So what we can now do is if we open up our camera controls, we can both transform, and we've got camera controls here to do with aperture and depth of field and all sorts of things. Okay, so I'm just going to move this up a little bit just so we can see what's going on. So we can begin with position. So position, if we start to move from left to right, you can see what's happening is it's keeping the subject in the frame. Whereas if, for example, if I double click on my camera settings and set this to one node camera, like so, if I now position, it's going to be moving around like that. It's going to move away from our subject, do you see? So you can see over here what's happening. The camera is moving from left to right as I adjust my position, and our subject is therefore moving within the frame. Whereas if we take that back to where it was, like so, oops, move that forward a bit, gone back too far, didn't I? And then go to camera, and oh yeah, because I've undid it, it's gone back to two node camera. If we now go to two node camera and then position, we can see that instead of that moving around, it's now just rotating as the camera moves around the subject. Can you see the difference? There we go. Cool. So obviously that's our left to right position, and we've also got up down, and we can also effectively track forward and back like that. So we've got two options here. We can either track forward, which is a different technique, obviously depending on our focal length is going to look different, or we can zoom, you know, and again that's going to look different, isn't it, depending on what it is that we want to do. Okay, so that's our footage at the moment. Now this is the sort of the cool bit, I think. This is one of my favorite bits about using cameras in After Effects, is that we've got this focus distance value here, and as we move that, you should see this is our focal, like our focal distance plane. So this tells us effectively where our depth of field is going to be, right? So if we pull it back towards the camera, you can see what's going to happen is it's going to move away from our course logo, and as we do that, basically it's just blurring everything because we've got our the amount of blur turned right up. Okay, now if we do it the other way and move this back towards our logo, it will gradually come into focus. And like so, we can then get it to the point where it's now nice and sharp on the DM, or we can keep going nice and sharp on our circle, or finally nice and sharp on the shadow in the background. Okay, and so lo and behold, that's what we're going to be animating first today. Is just doing some basic animation with those bits of our camera to create our scene. Okay, so what we're going to do is I'm going to choose my work area as being probably about like that. That'll do. Okay, and I'm going to turn on the stopwatch for position, camera position, and I'm going to turn on the stopwatch for focus distance. Okay, and I could zoom, but I think I might track back actually at this point and come into my logo like so. Okay, so I'm going to pull my camera back a bit like so. So that's our first keyframe, and I'm also going to start my focus distance as being all the way back onto the nice sharp background there, so that bit's sharp. And I'm also going to orient my clip, so I'm going to look at it like so, and I'm going to look down like that. Okay, that should do. I'm going to line these edges up so it looks nice and sharp. Okay, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to move through to about here. In fact, I'll move through to about there, and I'm going to do my position changes first, because then I finally need to focus on it once it's changed, because the focus will alter depending on my position. So now I'm going to move my my camera around my composition like so, and I'm going to move that up like that. There we go. I might move it a bit further just to get some separation between the foreground and the background, like so. And I'm going to, so I'm not quite liking that because that's too close to the circle. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to come back to my circle here, and I'm just going to pull that and get my Z axis and just pull it forward a little bit more, just so there's a bit more space. There we go, that's looking good. Right, so that's our positioning here now. And I'm also going to zoom in on it. Zoom in. I'm going to track in as well, bring the camera closer. So that's obviously different to zooming. And now that's changed it again, hasn't it? So now I'm going to just, it takes a little bit of fettling. Let's just to get it the way you want it. There we go. That'll do. And now what we're going to do, because that's our movement from there to there, is now I'm going to adjust my focus, but the focus is going to be adjusted. Hello, you too. That's all right, don't worry. I can cut this bit out. Hey you! Oh, it's a strawberry! So yeah, so this is our movement then. So it's a bit extreme actually, but for the purposes of this tutorial, I think I'll leave it as it is for now. It might look better once we've got some focus. So I'm going to change my focus now, and I'm going to bring my focal distance back towards the actual digital media logo itself, like the proper words, and I'm going to focus on the D rather than the M, just because I think that's always more interesting, and I think it just gives it a bit more presence as well if the first part of the word is sharp rather than the second. There we go. So now that that's sharp, I think I might just rotate this position a bit more. I think it's okay actually. I think we'll leave it at that. Okay, so here's our movement then. I don't think it's quite as elegant as the first example that I showed you. I think so you can sort of fettle yours and kind of play around with it and make it to sort of work the way you want it, because I'm not quite sure I'm pleased with that. But anyway, it'll do for now, just for the purposes of this tutorial. There we go. So you can see what's happening, can't you? Okay, now the final touch is that with the movement of this camera, we can use the speed ramping effect on it, or a speed control effect anyway, not quite speed ramping, that's a different technique, but the speed control effect on the movement of this camera in just the same way as we can with normal footage. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to go back to the start and we're going to click on position, right click, and we're going to go to keyframe assistant and easy ease. So rather than easy ease in and out, we're just going to go to easy ease, and that's going to affect both of our keyframes. And there they are. Now they're these hourglass kind of shapes, and now that's going to mean that our movement is now going to be much more subtle. It's going to start off slowly, it's going to speed up, and it's going to slow down again towards the end, just like a normal camera movement would. Like so. Okay, which just looks a bit more elegant again, doesn't it? And if we want to control that, obviously we can do. Just make sure we've got position clicked. We just click on the graph editor. And now what we can do is we can adjust our nodes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just drag this back like so, so that it starts off slower and gets faster. I just think it's a nice look for something like a logo or whatever. So if we just do that, there we go. I think that's looking pretty good. Let's just see that through at actual real time. Yeah, not bad, not too bad. There we go. So that's the first tutorial. So we're going to look in some next tutorials about things like setting up lighting and adding sort of wiggle effects and bits and pieces, but for now that's one of the sort of first principles of building cameras in After Effects, is that they kind of do what normal cameras do, it's just that you're making them virtually, that's all. Right, see you in the next tutorial.